So Joshua says that the tribulation has actually started September of 2025 on the 23rd and 24th, but that it's cut short in that we're not experiencing the effects of the tribulation right now. He believes that the second coming of Christ will still happen on September 15th in 2032, which is the Feast of Atonement. So he's sticking to this idea, and the idea is that the days would be cut short. We know that Jesus talked about that. Matthew 24:22, if those days had not been cut short, no one would survive, but for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. So Jesus himself says those days of the tribulation will be shortened. So what does that mean? How can they be shortened? Now it's interesting that Daniel gives us the number of that last part of the tribulation, which he says will be 1290 days, right? So you have the tribulation, which is a full 7-year period, and the Great Tribulation will be a 1260 day or 3.5 year period. So the first half of the tribulation will be 1260 days. The second half, it says 1260 also, but Daniel says in Daniel 12:11, that it will be a 1290 days until the cleansing of the temple, right? According to Daniel 12:11, there are 1290 days from the moment the daily sacrifice is stopped, which is the middle of the tribulation, and the abomination of desolation is set up. Many biblical scholars believe that the extra 30-day period, which brings the total to 1290 instead of 1260, is used for the judgment of the nations and the cleansing of the earth and the temple after Christ's return. So Daniel is giving us a specific number, 1290. In Revelation and other places in Daniel, it gives us 1260. So these are solid numbers that it's telling us this is the exact time frame of the tribulation. So that never made sense to me. How could it be? Jesus clearly says those days will be cut short. How can they be cut short if Daniel is telling me they won't be cut short? They will be exactly 1290 days or 1260 days. So how can it be? How do we answer this seeming discrepancy? Now, my belief used to be that the tribulation wouldn't be necessarily cut short, but that the 7 years, that it could have been longer than that, and the 7 years is the cutting short of it, right? So God has already cut it short. But that if it had continued, then no flesh would be left, so therefore God cuts it short to 7 years. The second half being 3.5 years, plus the 30 days of the 1290. So how can it be that we get this exact count from Daniel and John in Revelation when Jesus clearly says the days will be cut short? How do we make sense of this? So what Joshua is saying, does that make sense? Has the tribulation started so the numbers will pan out, but the tribulation events haven't fully started because the church is still here, and that it's being cut short in that way? In other words, we're still left here in part of the tribulation in the very beginning of it. In the 9 months, we're coming up to 9 months, right? Potentially leading to a birth of the church in the rapture. June is 9 months since September. So could it be that God has cut short the tribulation, right? The events of the tribulation, not that the days themselves and the timing would be cut short. It seems that way for us because it doesn't seem like the tribulation has started, right? But that he's cutting short the events, and it says clearly for the elect's sake. Now that's a big question. Who is the elect? We used to think, and I used to believe, that the elect were the Jews or the Israelites who will be in the tribulation, that he will cut that off. Generally, we think at the end he's going to shave off a bunch of days. Nobody knows exactly how much he would shave off. But again, it doesn't make sense because Daniel is giving us an exact day count. There is no shaving off according to Daniel or John. So there needs to be consistency, and there is consistency throughout the word. So what Joshua is bringing forward, it makes sense. It's very interesting. It's, for me, a plausible potential explanation. Maybe the tribulation has started technically, the time clock has started, but the church is still left here. Doesn't it feel that way? We're seeing things. Doesn't it feel like the tribulation has already potentially started? Every one of us, especially since September, is saying, meaning the people who are watching, the watchmen and the Christians who are saved who are watching, we're like, how much longer? Like, this is wild. We're tired. We don't want to be here. We're ready to go. It feels like we're overdue. We're on borrowed time. So could it be that God and Jesus is talking about the elect, the church, right? His bride. These are the elect. For their sake, these days will be cut short. This is a time period. This is Daniel's 70th week, right? This is the time of Jacob's trouble. The time itself potentially cannot be cut short. It says those days will be cut short. What does that mean? So maybe it means the days, the time frame, have not necessarily been cut short. It started, but the events of it have been cut short. Otherwise, no flesh would remain. So Generally, people think it's at the end. Well, why couldn't it be at the beginning? And that's what Joshua is saying. If it had already started September last year, like when the restrainer is removed and we had a rapture and the really, really bad stuff happened, and we went all the way until, let's say, September 15th, 2032, which is when he believes Jesus will return, perhaps there would be no flesh left. And perhaps this was all God's mercy. We're living in this mercy period. We know we're in God's mercy no matter what, right? But that we're in this period of it being cut short. The events themselves, the tribulation of the tribulation period being cut short. Makes a lot of sense. It's very interesting. So what Joshua is saying is that Jesus is delaying his coming, and that's also biblical. Well, technically that's debated because Matthew 24:28 talks about a delay. But it's the wicked servant says in his heart, my master is delayed. But we do see in Matthew 25:1-13, the parable of the bridegroom, that the bridegroom delays his coming. So again, this is in the Bible. There are other places where there was an initial call. Those people didn't want to come. Then there was a delay of the king. And then the king eventually comes and there is the marriage supper. So these ideas are in the Bible. You can't say they're not in the Bible, right? Oh, they don't exist. A delay of Jesus coming, that doesn't exist in the Bible. It's not present. That's not true. There's at least 3 examples, and we need to get 2 or 3 witnesses, 2 or 3 scriptures to back up any idea we have in the Word. So just to give a full picture of what Joshua is talking about and still holding to, as I'm reading from Google, it says, yes, South African preacher Joshua Malakela, it's probably Malakela. I still don't know how to pronounce his name. I've never heard him say it. I'm not gonna pull a Mike Winger on his last name, right? But Malakela, that's my attempt. Often referred to simply as Joshua. It should say as brother Joshua, because many people call him that. It says he prophesied that the second coming of Christ will occur on September 15th, 2032. Yes, that date is the Feast of Atonement, Yom Kippur. In his widely shared apocalyptic timeline, Joshua proposed a 25-50-day tribulation period that precisely begins and ends on the specific Jewish holidays. The rapture, the start of the 7-year tribulation, was predicted to occur on the Feast of Trumpets, Rosh Hashanah. Right? Now, it's very interesting that Joshua claims that God told him the exodus of the church would happen on these days, on September 23rd, 24th. I don't even think God used the word rapture in those initial encounters that he claims. He says Exodus first, which we know Exodus is a process. And also he says, I will come to get my church, which you could assume was the rapture. There could be other explanations. Come to get my church. And okay, is he coming to get us ready? Now, I'm not saying anything like the rapture has already happened in the spiritual realm and we're waiting for it in the physical. I will never say that. I don't believe that stuff. To me, that's a total cop-out, total pushing the can down the road. That's what the Seventh-day Adventists, actually the Seventh-day Adventists didn't say that, but the Jehovah's Witnesses have said that many, many times. They predicted the second coming, the rapture, in the 1800s. When it didn't happen, they had a new date. And I think in the 70s, they had another date. And eventually they said, well, it happened spiritually, but we're waiting for it physically. I don't agree to that. To me, that's total malarkey, lies. I'm not going to get with that. First of all, how do you prove that? It's just a total cop-out in my view. So that's not what I'm saying. But did the tribulation start? We assumed that that would be the rapture, but it was actually the Exodus, getting his people ready. I feel like he's been getting us ready since September. Like, more so than any other time. Don't you? So then we have the second coming, the visible return of Christ, lands exactly 50 days later on Yom Kippur, which would be the Day of Atonement. So Joshua is staying to those dates. He's just claiming that there's this delay of the Lord's coming, and there's a delay of the tribulation, like events starting. That's the cutting short that Jesus talks about. So then Google goes on to say, however, many Christians and theologians treat these dates with extreme skepticism. Yeah, you can say that again. That's for sure. The Bible explicitly states in Matthew 24:36 that no one knows the exact day or hour. Well, it doesn't say the word exact, but no one knows the day or the hour of Christ's return. Well, isn't that interesting that they said that Google said that? Because we're not talking about Christ's return. We're talking about the rapture. That's not Christ's return. That's the second coming, right? And that's what I've been realizing and people have been talking about for a long time now. That Matthew 24:36 is not talking about the rapture. Jesus is saying you won't know the exact day of the hour of his second coming. It's similar to the verse where he says to them, it's not for you to know the times that the Father is up to him to know and set, because they asked him about his second coming and when is he going to establish the new heaven and new earth, or rather his millennial reign on the earth. That's what they were asking him about. They weren't asking him about the rapture that happened 7 years before all this bad stuff happens. Jesus was telling them about the tribulation, the time of Jacob's trouble, the 70th week of Daniel. They were thinking, you're going to rule from Jerusalem and you're going to have all our enemies be under your footstool. When is that going to happen? He says, it's not for you to know that. And you won't know the day or the hour of that. So that's interesting that they're kind of admitting that right here, right? That no one knows the day or the hour of Christ's return. That's his second coming. And date setting for the end of the world has a long history of failing to come to pass. Obviously. Thank you, Captain Obvious. We already know that. It's like when people say, you've been wrong the whole time and I've been right the whole time. Yeah, that's not rocket science. Because you're not making a prediction. You're saying it's not going to happen. That's not a prediction. Anybody can say it won't happen, or it probably won't happen. And again, people who say it for sure won't happen on this date, I don't know how you're a prophet. I understand you're not into prophets. You think Joshua was a false prophet. You think anybody who sets dates is a false prophet and they're doing wrong. Okay, you're free to say that and feel that way. Speak out against it. Absolutely. You're free. I'm not even arguing with that. Right? But for you to say that I know it won't happen. I know I've seen people in the comments. There will be a World Cup. Are you a prophet now? How can you say there will be? Now, at the same time, yeah, any Tom, Dick, and Harry can say, yeah, there will be a World Cup. There won't be a rapture before then. Right? And you might be right. In fact, chances are, up until this point, you would have been right if you said, no, that September 23rd, 24th, there won't be a rapture. Hey, I was right. Yeah, that's not much of a feat to say you were right. You're going with the rest of the world that says, that won't happen. Again, you're free to do that. I'm not saying you're wrong. But it's interesting also that the day that no man knows the day or the hour of, the feast that nobody knows the day or the hour of, is the Feast of Trumpets. I mean, these are facts on the ground. You could say, no, it's not a Jewish idiom, no, and just throw the whole thing out. But talk to Jewish people. Ask them, is there any kind of connection with not knowing the day or the hour of any of your feast days? Potentially the Feast of Trumpets, the first one on the fall feast that hasn't been fulfilled by Jesus. You don't have to say that to them, although you should, right? We should preach to the Jewish people. Tell them who their Messiah is, their true Messiah, Yeshua. But if you just go with that, they'll probably tell you, oh yeah, because it's based on the new moon. We don't know the exact day or the hour. There were these two witnesses that were sent out. So they had a window, but they didn't know the exact day or hour. Right? But all over the Bible, Jesus is telling us, you'll know the season, be prepared for the season. He criticized the Pharisees and the leaders for not knowing the season of his first coming. They knew his first coming. Is it possible we will know the second coming? Now, Jesus says, you don't know the day or the hour of my second coming. Okay, we're not even talking about the second coming. We're talking about the rapture. None of this is definitive. I'm not saying go sell anything. I'm not even telling you to do anything. I'm just talking about a potential of something happening. Is it potential that there will be a rapture soon this summer? Absolutely. With everything going on, with all kinds of numbers and dates and calendars. Look at Repo Man 64. Look at Brother Brett at God's Land Down Under. Right? Sister Gigi Blue Heaven. Chris at Global Rapture Watchers. The guys at End Time Streams and Visions. I mean, all these watchmen. We're all looking at this summer. We're all looking at this week. June. This is huge. Could there be a rapture? Absolutely. Is it possible that the tribulation has started, but we're not experiencing it fully yet? Because all this stuff we're looking at, as I've been saying, everything that they're predicting to happen in June, July, August, September, right now, with the market crashes and everything. I just watched a video from Nick Fuentes. He don't believe in the pre-trib rapture. I'll tell you that right now. He's a Catholic. He's an amillennialist. He's not a liberal. He doesn't have Trump derangement syndrome. He voted for Trump 3 times. And he's telling us that everybody is saying, all the analysts are saying, political, economic, right? Otherwise, are saying these are not rapture watchers. They're saying if something is not done in the Strait of Hormuz like now, that July, August, September will be a disaster that the world has never seen before. Like you can't believe. To me, that sounds like tribulation language. So we're all seeing that. And when I talk about it, it's like I start to say that the tribulation is forming right in front of us, right? But the tribulation hasn't started. So that's confusing. Perhaps tribulation has started back in September 23rd, 24th of 2025. We're just not fully experiencing it. And since that we're getting closer to the rapture, now we're seeing it closer and closer that those events are starting to look like they're about to happen. So absolutely phenomenal, guys. Keep watching. This is highest rapture watch time. I hope to make more videos. I didn't have work today. I took off partly because of this stuff, man. Like, I don't even want to work anymore. And I know the haters hate that. They love that one. They're like, oh, see, these people don't want to work. No, we're going to work. We're doing our thing. But if somebody decides to not go, that's none of your business. Sure, you can criticize. You have that freedom of speech to do that. Sure. And also, we have the freedom to take off work and not go to work and sit on the corner and wait for Jesus if we want. And you can sit there and criticize. But who are you to criticize another servant? We're not your servant. All those channels that are doing that, we are not your servants. We're God's servants. So we do, just like you do, what you feel God wants you to do. The Bible is clear. We're not supposed to criticize each other about our service. Everybody does different things for the Lord. They feel called to do different things. If I sat there on the corner at the bus stop right now and just preached about Jesus' second coming and I decided to not work and eat whatever scraps and stop paying my bills, that's my prerogative. I'm allowed to do that. And you can criticize me? Sure. Who's to say you're right and I'm wrong? How do you know how many people I'm going to help when I do that? Again, I'm not telling you to do that. Do whatever you feel called to do. Call out of work. Don't work. Work. Shorten your days, shorten your hours. That's what I've been feeling like I want to do. I don't want to do this 40-hour grunt for what? Even if there is no rapture, just realization that, like, this is not how to live a life. This is not a good lifestyle. The American way of life of just like 60 plus hours and just, like, what are we doing? What am I living for? And I've already known this from the day I went into the workforce. I knew there's got to be something more. I remember getting my first big job in Manhattan, right? Right off 8th Avenue, actually. It was on 10th Avenue on the west side, Upper West Side. And I was working 40 plus hours. I was working overtime. And I had this realization, and I was a young guy at that time. I was in my early 20s. And I remember talking to my friend who I was working with. There's got to be more to this, man. What is this? Because we just became adults, right? We were officially adults. We're working and living in New York City. And he was doing it before me. He got the job before me. And here we are. And I go, there's got to be something more, man. And my friend sat there and told me, what do you mean? There's nothing more. This is it. You work, you go home, you watch TV, you go to sleep, you get up, you do it the next day. You have a family, you go on vacation when you can. That's it. I couldn't accept that. And I didn't accept that. I said, no, I don't accept that, man. There's got to be something more. So I kept searching. And that's been my search. I went the spiritual route and discovered God. Had an experience with God before I even got saved that I knew for a fact that he was real. And I started serving him and doing his will the best that I could and praying on a daily basis. The first thing that happened for me, I had a miracle happen in my life that brought me to God. And as soon as after that happened, the very first thing I started doing was praying and giving thanks for my meals. Every meal I ever had. I heard a video recently from a watchman that not praying and giving thanks for your meals is actually breaking the Torah. That's breaking the law of God because you're supposed to do that. I had no idea. That's the first time I heard it, like 2 days ago. Right? But in 2008, when this happened to me, when this miracle happened, I immediately started thanking God for my meals. I remember sitting with that same friend who told me there's nothing else in life. And I was telling him there was. We went out to eat. I think it was like at Fridays. We got a burger right on 34th Street in Manhattan. And I just paused before we ate and I gave thanks to the Lord. And he said, whoa, what was that, right? Because I wasn't religious. I wasn't spiritual when I knew him. Me and him had a band together called A Few Common Spiderwebs. You guys can check out the music on my channel. And I was like kind of like an emo-ish acoustic band where I sang and played guitar and he did backups and he sang also. We traded verses and vocals and stuff like that. Right? We were writing about all kinds of things. Lost love, girls that we were in love with, fun things we had done in our lives. We were friends for a while. All kinds of things, I wasn't writing about God. Actually, I was. Subtly, it was in there. When I listen back, it's interesting. But I remember him going, whoa, what is that? You're praying? What are you doing? And I said, yeah, I'm just giving thanks to my food and everything I have, like just in this moment. Like, He's like, well, I don't believe in God. I'm like, that's fine. I'm just giving thanks, like to whatever, anything, the universe, just even if it's nothing, just giving. That was like the start of my walk with God, which eventually led me to Christ, which eventually led me to my salvation, guys. You know? So, and many people of the younger generations are seeing this too. There's got to be more to this. And there are other countries who are realizing, you know, they've implicated 4-day work weeks. Places like Europe, from my understanding, and, you know, Scandinavia, Switzerland, places like that, like they have a better work-play ratio, right? They have paid time off more. They have paid family leave. And like when we get pregnant, they can stay home. America's like, we've got this mentality, the grind, just like, and that's what you see when us watchers come out here and talk about this. Immediately there's this, and it's a very American thing. You don't see other people doing this too much, but the American anti-watcher crowd, it's like, oh, look at you. You just don't want to work. Oh, you don't want to work 80 hours a day. You know, it's like, this is just hailing back to like this old, anyway, here we are, guys. Not much longer. I believe the rapture is going to come soon. I don't know that for sure. I'm not saying for 100% for sure. I'm not telling you to stop working. No, keep doing whatever you feel is especially if you have children, if you have a family. That's different, by the way. That's a different case. If you're single and what does it matter if you work? As long as you can pay your bills and eat, pay your debts, like, so what? Right? So I got off on a little bit of a tangent on that one, but I'm telling you guys, this is super interesting. I believe that, I don't know, September was super interesting. The way everybody started talking about the rapture, it did seem significant, and then nothing happened. There was no rapture for 9 months now. And it's like, what? What was all that about? That was just a big nothing? Come on. Like, that couldn't have been nothing. It seemed like something was happening in the spiritual realm then. And I've talked to many people who said they believe the tribulation has already started. And here we are. And I believe the rapture of the church is soon, which means the restraining power will be removed. And then the events of the tribulation will really start to happen. Does it mean it will happen right away? No. A lot of us have already talked about maybe after the church, there's a certain time, a period of time when the Antichrist gets his things ready and the 10 horns are forming, and maybe it won't get really, really bad right away. So already there's that idea in the rapture community that not that as soon as the rapture happens, boom, all the bad stuff happens, and right, the events of the tribulation happens. No, there was always this idea of like a grace period potentially as things get set up. So maybe we're in that grace period ever since September. It's totally plausible. To me it is. Right? Could be wrong. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just giving you ideas. So I love you guys. This is wild. This is wild. And honestly, I feel like I'm getting that same energy that I had back in September and those days after September as I was waiting. I mean, it was like every weekend, right? Huge watch time. Here we go again. You know, past few weeks recently, it seemed to lull, and now I feel like it's back again. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Love you guys so much. Keep coming back. Jesus loves you. Peace.